The 1969 serial The Seeds of Death, starring Patrick Troughton as the Second Doctor and featuring the return of the Ice Warriors, was one of the first Doctor Who's I ever saw, and I loved it. But it's only in later years have I appreciated just how brilliantly it's put together. And whilst sadly it doesn't rank very highly in Doctor Who polls, which I think is a travesty, I would argue it is one of the best directed Doctor Who serials ever made. So in this video I want to try to explain why Michael Ferguson is one of the most extraordinary and underrated directors Doctor Who ever had. Some of it is from an aesthetic point of view and is there on screen, and some of it is from a technical point of view, but ultimately what he achieved went far beyond the standard Doctor Who of the 1960s. He made black and white Doctor Who in a way that nobody else did. My name is Gavin Rymil, I love symmetry, shadows and lumbering rubber monsters. So join me as I delve into why the second Ice Warrior story was the most ambitious 1960s Doctor Who ever made. If you'd like to support our research, contribute ideas, and see clips and early videos, then check out the link in the description on how to join our Patreon. Michael Ferguson was a man with brilliant visual flair, but his camera scripts reveal tremendous ambition, pushing the studio recordings to their very limits, and making full use of every single resource that was available to him at the time. But before I talk about his brilliant technical trickery, let's look at his visuals, because he was one of the few directors that really cared about cinematography. And right from the very beginning, he reveals his priorities, because this deliberate, slow opening shot shows a couple of the things that makes Michael Ferguson so special. Firstly, his love of symmetry. He has the camera precisely lined up with the scenery, in a shot that wouldn't be out of place in a Stanley Kubrick film. Symmetry like this is used throughout the story. For example, the composition in this shot is superb. The Ice Warriors in profile, in half silhouette in the foreground, but notice the camera is very nicely aligned with the control panel in the background, in the centre of picture, and the Ice Warriors and the rest of the scenery adhering to the rule of thirds. And the very pleasing division of the screen into thirds is something he does throughout the serial. But in this particular shot, it's not just aesthetics without thought, because Ferguson makes us intimately involved in the aliens' discussion about the fates of the humans. And whilst we are uncomfortably welcomed into the evil conspiracy, the unwitting humans are left out of focus in the distance of the shot, unaware of the discussion of their fate. But the other thing that this opening shot exemplifies is Ferguson's desire to frame his shots in an interesting way. There are examples in every episode where Ferguson is keen to use features of the set simply to make the visuals more engaging in a way that other directors would either deem unnecessary or it just wouldn't occur to them. Now, I know it's not very classy to try to elevate one person's work by being negative about another's, but let's just compare this to the opening shot of the Ice Warriors' debut story, directed by Derek Martinez. There's quite a dynamic pan out, but then there's a 14-second static wide shot. Or compare it to the next story after the Ice Warriors, The Enemy of the World, directed by Barry Letts, which opens on quite a long, unremarkable static shot of the TARDIS. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with the Ice Warriors or Enemy of the World, but nothing about them stands out. And although I mentioned the duration of the shot in the Ice Warriors, that's not really the issue, because there are actually nearly twice as many cuts in the opening minute of the Ice Warriors compared to the Seeds of Death. It's more important to pay attention to the framing and the movement of the camera. For example, this is how Derek Martinez introduces the character of Garrett. She's a vital character being seen in a dramatic moment, but we're shown her in long shot. But in the same circumstances, Ferguson goes for this shot, introducing his supporting character of Brent up close and personal, so we can see the anxiety in his face, whilst Kelly is present in the shot, but deep out of focus in the background. And after he turns to check the map, we get this marvellous shot. Not only does it spark interest because of the obscurity in the foreground, but behind Brent, beautifully framed, is the Earth and the Moon, two key settings of the rest of the story. And look at this simple two-shot with Kelly and Osgood. She's kept perfectly in profile in the foreground, and then the focus pulls from one to the other as the conversation changes. You just don't get shots like this in any other Doctor Who of the time. Often when shooting TV shows or movies, the director or director of photography will discover things accidentally during the shoot and get wonderful serendipitous shots. And there are numerous occasions in The Seeds of Death where actors seem to align perfectly with bits of scenery. But check Michael Ferguson's camera script and you will discover that these are no accidents. He has meticulously planned the visuals he wants to frame in his shots, such as this image of Brent, which is not just in perfect profile once again, but positioned within the circle of the Earth behind him. And here we see in Ferguson's script, not only is the profile stipulated, but the diagram behind. And this isn't just done for the aesthetics of the nice framing, but also as a representation of Brent operating from the safety of TMAT Earth control, delivering a man to the moon. And then when we cut to Kelly, there's another terrific use of depth of focus as we see Osgood in the background blowing a kiss to Kelly's exasperation. More fastidious planning is in the blocking of his extras, as this woman in the foreground is written into the camera script. So she stands still while the TMAC cubicle activates, and then when the camera zooms out, the camera direction is to follow her left and then settle on Brent for the remainder of the shot. Obviously this isn't exceptional stuff, but it's the kind of thing that a director who was less thoughtful or less ambitious would omit to save time and effort, because every additional cog in your machine can create problems. One of the visual themes that we see throughout The Seeds of Death is opacity. Constantly Ferguson is shooting through things, resulting in actors being slightly obscured, whether it be through a TMAC cubicle, through this wall graphic, or this textured Perspex panel. And these motifs of visibility and viewpoints extend throughout the story, because not only does the key technology revolve around a camera trick where things appear and disappear, but also the villains in the story live their lives behind Perspex lenses. And unusually, we even get a whole scene from the viewpoint of these aliens, albeit without the lenses. But with Michael Ferguson having no access to a handheld camera for the weekly videotaping sessions, the resultant attempt to emulate the point of view of the Ice Warrior walking is not entirely successful. And just to note on this style of camera work, when Ferguson does get access to a handheld camera during the pre-filmed sequences, he makes excellent use of it, getting the audience's viewpoint in amongst the squad of soldiers, providing a really strong sense of reality in almost documentarian style footage, really placing us in the moment. But back to videotaping. It's fascinating to look at the camera script and discover that Michael Ferguson's ambition exceeded the limitations of the props and costumes that he had available. One example of a lost shot is that this scene with Fusham was meant to be captured in the reflection of the lenses of Slar's helmet. So it would have looked something like this, had Michael Ferguson got his cinematic shot that he had hoped for. In a later episode, they have a second attempt at getting this shot, with reflective material installed in one lens of the helmet. But it isn't wholly successful, as it did take me quite a few viewings to realise you can actually see Fusham distorted in the lens. So it is eye-catching, but not exactly what he wanted. But of course, some of the occasions shooting through objects are a necessity of the story, as a whole subplot involves peering through the grille to spy on the main control room and eventually access the heating controls. And a neat behind-the-scenes detail here is that the director realised that to achieve Phipps's point of view, it wasn't possible to simply put a camera up to the real grille, as it would have been too defocused in the foreground and not conveyed the desired effect. So the viewpoint was faked with a different material. Just alongside the actor's position, a much bigger grille was set up, suitable for the camera, that would create the illusion of looking through the smaller one. But as well as transparency, the other optical theme throughout the story is light and shade. We begin every episode with the sun and an eclipse. All through the serial, to add to the mood and create a sinister and unsettling atmosphere, he shoots the actors in shadow, and he has shadows casting on the walls. And you have to remember that none of this happens by accident. So when you see a shot like this, which lasts less than 2 seconds and is solely to create menace and atmosphere, you might make that mistake of thinking this is one of these things that could have been developed spontaneously on the night. However, when you look at Ferguson's script, you see that camera 4 in position A features the path of light. Let the Ice Warrior's shadow in top of frame. So just for this brief moment, he had to think about the lighting rig and the position of the actor and the movement. And as well as raking shadows, Ferguson uses silhouettes in a remarkably film noir style. Some of the most arresting images in this serial are times when you can't make out the detail of the characters. And speaking of film noir, there's even a Dutch angle. And while we're on this shot, from a technical point of view, he also does something really inventive, which is to use this set twice, but the second time he shoots it through a mirror so you think it's a different corridor. Likening his visual style to a movie is not just about the composition of each frame. It's also about how each shot was put together and how all the scenes were edited. As mentioned, every shot had to be planned in advance, and someone called the shots from the gallery in real time. This cumbersome planning process made rapid cutting very unusual in 1960s Doctor Who. You will see it in the location sequences because these were captured with a film camera and could be edited like a feature film. And Ferguson's work on film is absolutely brilliant. Look how short some of these shots are in this almost surreal montage of the Ice Warrior attacking the guards. But this frenetic pace was almost unheard of in the videotaping studios. And yet, Michael Ferguson finds a way. One of my favourite moments is where Slar forces Fusham to team at the Doctor out into space. And Ferguson does this amazing thing with 2 slow zooms, one on each camera, and he simply flicks back and forth between them. This creates a sense of urgency, but in a way that can be achieved live on the night and requires no later editing. Although stories are often told that early Doctor Who was recorded as if it was live, the lack of editing has been slightly overstated in the past. A small number of edits could be achieved by physically cutting the tape, but the reason it was discouraged was that too many cuts to the tape stopped it being viable for reuse. But by the mid-60s, a newer editing method was being introduced, as shown in this internal BBC document. So by the time Seeds of Death was made in 1969, as well as the old-fashioned snipping method, the new electronic editing was now available. So when Ferguson wanted rapid cuts in his videotaping sessions, he was not shy in editing the videotape afterwards. And what's really impressive about some of Ferguson's work is it's invisible. You don't know why what you're seeing is so cleverly done. So the really smart planning he puts in place here is that you get 5 shots in rapid succession. Slar's hand, Locke, Slar, Phipps and Fusham. But Ferguson only has 3 cameras at his disposal for this scene. So to get his 5 rapid cuts with only 3 cameras, what he does is call for a pause in the action after the first 3 shots so that he can reposition the cameras. Then he calls action again to take another quick 3 shots on the same 3 cameras. The recording pause option could be used as basically a live edit on the night, or these pauses could be edited out later, and we can't say for certain which Michael Ferguson did. But rest assured, some of the questions raised here are being saved for a deep dive in a forthcoming video. But however the pauses were removed, he used a lot of them. The next was used for a visual effects setup. The Ice Warrior walking towards the camera here is on camera 1, but there is then a recording pause, and camera 1 is repositioned to look at the Ice Warrior's gun. When the action is resumed, this shot of the gun is then combined with a pre-filmed visual effect of the glow for the weapon. But as well as queuing up the pre-recorded film, this little break allowed them to maneuver a piece of mirrored material into position so that the actor playing Locke could be seen in the reflection. The material was then distorted from behind, creating this distinctive visual effect, previously innovated by Derek Martinez for the Ice Warriors' original debut story. There is then another recording pause, allowing that same camera 1 to be repositioned again, this time for a deep 3 shot, where the camera's instruction is to zoom through to a 2 shot of Phipps and Fuchsium as Locke falls. And surprisingly, he even does it one more time before the scene finishes, as this over-the-shoulder shot of Slar facing Fuchsium is on camera 1 in position A, and then we pan down to Locke's body. There is then a recording pause, so that camera 1 can move across the studio to a different set, and when Ferguson calls action once again, the shot is on Fuchsium on camera 2, and then the image mixes back to camera 1 in order to start the next scene. To be completely balanced about the success of this approach, it's important to note that the version we've been looking at is the modern restored version, in which any traces of the edits have been removed. So if we go back to an unrestored version, this has been sourced from the Australian Repeats broadcast, we can see the evidence of Ferguson's editing process. If you remember, just before Locke is killed, there is a recording pause in order to set up the effect of the gun. This electronic blip marks the location of that recording pause. For reasons unknown, the time afforded by the recording pause was obviously not enough for everyone to get all their ducks in a row for live vision mixing on the night to capture the next few shots perfectly, because here is the evidence of another video edit. And the edit surrounding the next documented recording pause takes a different form of video blip, as here you can see wobbly distortion at the top of picture. And there's a few more examples of these blips in the following cuts, here, and another couple on Slar. And sometimes scrutinizing these edit points will reveal a little detail, such as here, the moment before you get the electronic edit, you can just make out the ghost of the face of Louise Pajo in the original frame of the footage that's trimmed out of the final version. And you'll see it's a completely different shot after the edit point. As mentioned, we can't be sure that all the recording pauses were edited out in post-production. But some editing we can be sure was done in post-production is to rearrange the scenes that were shot out of order, because by this point directors were taking advantage of the post-production process. The aforementioned Enemy of the World and The Invasion both exploited the option to shoot their scenes out of order and then re-edit them later. This is exactly what Ferguson does in The Seeds of Death, recording all of Phipps's scenes in one go. So we have scene 4 where the Ice Warrior initially comes in, then there's a recording pause for artists and cameras to reposition, then scene 6A, another recording pause, scene 14A, another recording pause before scene 16A, and another recording pause before scene 18 where the Ice Warrior returns. And this is where things get interesting. So after another recording pause, camera 3 is fitted with a mirror, which functions like a periscope, but can be fitted in such a way as to get a low angle. As you can see from the construction of these cameras, they were not capable of reaching the floor in their normal configuration. And this is the resultant shot with the camera at knee height. And after Phipps puts the plug in the socket, there's then another recording pause in order to set up all 4 cameras available to show the booby trap being triggered. And when recording resumes, the instruction is to go to negative, and then only 3 shots are listed, 87, 88 and 89 on cameras 2, 3 and 1, each a different view of the Ice Warrior. But as you can see in the finished version, the very fast intercutting is done back and forth multiple times between different angles. Ferguson then utilizes another recording pause to move one of his negative cameras over to shoot Phipps, and then recording resumes with the Ice Warrior in a slightly different position And the result of this sleight of hand is that we get 5 different angles of the Ice Warrior, plus one of Phipps. So again, Ferguson making it look like there was a lot more coverage than he really had. But with all this hyperbole about camera tricks, I don't want to make out that Ferguson wasn't an actor's director. Some of the performances in Seeds of Death are terrific, particularly Terry Scully as Fusham, and Alan Benyon as Slar is a wonderful performance and one of the most memorable aliens of classic Doctor Who. In fact, they brought him back twice more because of this. But Ferguson was also very adept at what you might call bread and butter staging, normal dialogue scenes that need to be blocked out in a way that enhances the script. So let's analyse this early scene as an example. So first, because Professor Eldred is being guarded and isolated, he goes to the corner and turns his back on the camera. Then as he opens up, Radner moves upstage to join him, and then Kelly goes into his space to try to persuade him. But then what Ferguson does is have Eldred come back downstage, so that now he has bared his soul, his emotions are filling the frame, and Radner comes forward to empathise with him, and Kelly has to adjust her position slightly so that she is between the two men, and all 3 of them can then be seen. I'm not saying this is a groundbreaking piece of blocking, but it's beautifully staged with the characters moving away and towards the camera depending on the level of emotional connection we are feeling with them. But as well as keeping the actors moving, he often just keeps the camera moving to ensure that shots don't look boring. Here we have a mundane shot of Phipps fiddling with this technology, enlivened by the fact that the camera is crabbing to the right and panning to the left, creating some parallax that just makes the scene more alive. And look at this lovely transitional cut from the circular power socket to the circular telejector slide of Professor Eldred. And to further enliven this launch sequence, he has these wonderful mixes of the characters and the computer panels. And then to make the countdown as exciting as possible, instead of mixing between 2 images, he projects the countdown onto the face of actress Louise Pajo. A quirky choice, but it works really well. I could go on all day about the reasons I think Seeds of Death is brilliant. It's a great action adventure, it's a superb example of the base under siege format, and as you might have noticed, I can't speak highly enough of director Michael Ferguson. The word romp is often applied to the Seeds of Death, and although structurally it may not seem exceptional, but the care and visuals of Michael Ferguson elevate this serial to another level. I can't think of a Doctor Who from the 1960s whose visuals are more consistently stimulating and that was put together in a more innovative way. So next time you're asked to give it a rating in a Doctor Who magazine poll, maybe consider rating it a little bit higher than you normally would have done. And that'll make me really happy.